the Florida Writer Podcast, a discussion about writing and other things.
Hello, and welcome to another edition of the Florida Writer Podcast with your host, Alison Nissen. And today I am lucky enough to be with Mark Shaiken. Mark, could you give us a 60-second elevator pitch about who you are and what you write?
I'm a recovering attorney after 40 years in the corporate bankruptcy trenches. I left the practice of law in 2019 to explore the things that I was truly passionate about. And that was writing, serving on some nonprofit boards, turning to having a lot more time to attend to my music, and reintroducing myself to my family.
Well, you sound like you have a lot of creativity in you if you went from law to writing and music, which is quite an interesting shift. All right, let's start with bankruptcy law. How did you even get into that?
Totally accidentally. The same way I kind of got into the whole law business. I was a third year student in law school, so my senior year, and had no idea what I was going to do. I had gone to law school to sort of kick the can of what I was going to do with my life down the road for 3 years, and then the 3 years was quickly upon me. One of the bankruptcy judges in the city where I was attending law school put up a 3x5 card at the placement office. This is pre-internet, how people get jobs these days. And I just happened to be there as the placement officer put the card up and thought, well, I don't know anything about bankruptcy. I've never taken the bankruptcy law class. This might work for a couple more years of kicking the can. And I interviewed and I absolutely loved the judge, and he hired me. And he taught me the bankruptcy code. And from there, I finished the clerkship in 1984. And so for the historians of the world, that was the deep oil crisis of the Texas, Oklahoma, Colorado era. The rest of the country was doing okay. Those three states, not so much. And the law firms in Houston were calling law clerks, bankruptcy law clerks, in cold calls to see if they'd come down and work in Houston. It was just that grim. And I moved sight unseen to Houston, started as a bankruptcy associate. And 38 years later, I was scratching my head wondering how I got into this.
Well, an interesting connection is although this is the Florida Writer Podcast, currently live in Houston. So
same idea. Yeah.
Same idea. Exactly. Okay. Bankruptcy law sounds like it could be a little boring. Is it?
If you're in the case, if you're the one that owes the money, it's far from boring because it can be life and death, economically life and death. It's very intense. It's very contentious. There's never enough money to go around, and everybody wants to be paid. And the debtor, the one that owes the money, either doesn't or won't pay. And there's a little bit of both sometimes. And for the parties involved in the case, it's pretty intense. It makes the news. Some famous cases, WorldCom, Enron, huge companies that have a bet the company kind of problem going on, and they end up filing bankruptcy. So yeah, it can be boring for the outsiders, but not for the players.
And have you written essays and things about your experiences?
While I was practicing, I wrote 2 law books, 2 treatises they're called, on bankruptcy law. So I kind of knew how the writing game went, and that I actually enjoyed that a great deal. And I had a publisher that was wonderful. I didn't realize how spoiled I was at the time. All I had to do was deliver copy, and they would do the rest, including marketing. When at some point, maybe the last 5 years of practicing, I really did want to sort of explore a little bit of my wild oats and write. And so I decided that I would try to create a fictional character that was a bankruptcy lawyer. You kind of write what you know, in Kansas City, which is where I principally practiced after I finished in Houston, and kind of see if I could create a financial thriller genre, with bankruptcy being there. I will admit that I researched quite a bit on Amazon, to the extent you can do this, whether there were other fictional books out there with bankruptcy as a principal part of the book, and there really weren't. There was one, but other than that, none. And that either means I found something that was new and exciting, or that nobody in their right mind would ever do this, one or the other. But I went down that path, and it's been a blast. I've enjoyed it.
Now you've written 2 books, and The first is more of a memoir, or is it a memoir of a fictional character?
No, it's real. The first is a memoir of a not famous bankruptcy lawyer, that me, sort of tracing my path in to the law, the accidental way. I kind of just stumbled into going to law school and then stumbled into the bankruptcy world. And my essays about what it was like to be a lawyer at a big firm, and then the decision to exit, and then the exit, and then what I call the afterlife. So it's in 4 or 5 parts. And what was interesting about that book is it really seemed to hit a chord with the whole career pivot, career change industry. I began to get phone calls and cold calls and emails from lawyers first who were wanting to get out of the practice of law and had never really been able to organize their thoughts of how they would do it or what they would do after the practice. It was somewhat remarkable how many people picked up the phone and called me. And that all of a sudden led to career pivot experts, because I'm not a career pivot expert. I know how I did it, but that doesn't make me an expert, who wanted to talk to me and put me on podcasts and sort of discuss my path in and out. And the book is a career pivot book, but unlike other career pivot books, it's not me telling people this is the 5 things you need to do. I make it pretty clear in the book that this is what I did, but I can't tell anybody that that's the right list for them. I've always thought it's a very personal journey and personal decision, and there isn't 5 things that just apply to everyone.
Well, that's true. And trying to make the universal is impossible, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Tell me about your second book.
So the second book, which I started when the first book went into the editing phase, is my first work of fiction, and it's called Fresh Start, and it's going to be a series. It's a legal thriller, a bankruptcy law thriller set in Kansas City, Missouri. The debtor, the one that owns the money, is a real estate developer of skyscrapers throughout the country. His banker is closing in on him and believes that he's hiding assets, but can't prove it. Just has one of those banker gut feelings that the debtor, whose name is Witherman, is a bad actor. Witherman hires the hero in the book, Josephina Jillian Jones, 3J to her friends, who's a bankruptcy lawyer. She's an African-American bankruptcy lawyer in this large firm in Kansas City. And she's hired to reorganize his debts and deal with the banks who are coming after him and have made a demand for a huge payment from him that he either can't or won't make. It's in the third person mostly, but also in the first person. So we get to hear Witherman's first person perspective. And by doing that, the reader gets something of a direct insight into what it's like to be a debtor and owe money. And, if he is hiding assets, how that works, and what are his thoughts about, being a felon if he is hiding assets.
Oh, that is really intriguing. Your heroine is an African-American woman. And while people can't see you, I can, and you are not an African-American woman. So can you tell me what it was like to write the other?
Yeah. So this was something that I gave a lot of thought to. And it's such a, important topic. And for me, diversity is super important, even though I am, a white older male. I've grown up in a world where I've learned and believe that diversity is one of our strengths. Someday, hopefully, the rest of the country will get in line with that. And I began to think, well, if I write a character that just looks like me, everybody in the book's just going to be, an old retired, white man. And I didn't want to do that. At the same time, I have to respect, I'm not a woman. I don't know firsthand what it's like to try to advance in a white man's world. Although I can watch it, I don't know firsthand what it feels like. And I'm certainly not Black. And so I don't know what it's like, to have to raise your kids to tell them you can't have a toy gun because if you do, somebody, might shoot you merely because of the color of your skin. And I certainly don't know what it's like to be a Black woman in a white man's law firm. All of that having been said and having to respect what I don't know, I don't think that means that the book can't have diversity in it. There will be limitations, and I should respect the fact that I'm not going to be the one to have to get into 3J's head and have that be my vehicle to explain what it's like for her to be in a lily white law firm. But nevertheless, I still think it's important. I had a lot of discussions about this with friends some of whom are people of color. And before I did it, before I created the character, and there were great discussions, and I value everything they said. And there was a variety of reactions to the going down the path from "ooh, that's risky" in the modern era to "ooh, that's stupid because you don't know what it's like to be a Black woman." But I would say most people, as they thought about it, thought it was a good idea. And so far, from the reviews in the modern era of, you get on Amazon and read the reviews of how people have reacted to the book, there have been no reviewers that have taken on that issue as a way of saying I was out of line. And the last thought I had about it is, if everybody that was a white male of a growing elderly nature, as I am, could get more comfortable in having their books reflect what society actually looks like, it would be a better world.
It would be a better world. Did you have any sensitivity readers, like beta readers, helping you?
It didn't. And I had a good reason for that, or I thought I had a good reason for that. I've had people read some of my books, but I thought, okay, so I'm going to find a person of color to read the book. And to me, that almost seemed like a tokenism kind of thing. The only reason I'm asking them to read the book is because they're Black, and if I'm lucky, a Black woman. And the only reason I'm calling them into the circle to do that is because they're a Black woman. And I didn't like the way that felt. And so I actually dove into this without a person of color advising me.
Do you have advice for anyone who wants to go ahead and write a different types of characters in there?
I guess I don't know that I'm an expert on it, that I would be able to offer really good advice. I just feel like the more that people get comfortable with reflecting the world that we live in, rather than a world that at least I don't live in. I don't live in a world where everybody was white, and I didn't grow up living in a world where everyone was white. I was one of the kids that was bused into the inner city to schools to integrate the school. I feel like it's something that people shouldn't be afraid to try to address and take on.
Great advice. Thank you so much, Mark. Thank you for this conversation. How can people get in touch with you?
I think the easiest way is my webpage, which is markshaikenauthor.com. And there you can sign up for my mailing list, follow as the new book will come out, and I hope in April. The new book will be called Automatic Stay. So all the book titles come from some bankruptcy code section, and I don't write a lot of emails to the mailing list, so you can sign up without worrying that you're going to get spammed. Or the other way to connect with me is really through Amazon by just searching for my name, and you can follow the authors there as well.
Well, fantastic. Mark Shaiken, are you ready to switch to our rapid fire questions?
Yeah, go for it.
All right. What has been your favorite volunteer activity?
My favorite volunteer activity is Habitat for Humanity. While I practiced, I was able to help build some homes in Kansas City from time to time. I think I'm old enough now that I shouldn't be on a ladder, painting on the second floor of a house under construction, but I'm on Habitat for Denver, Metro Denver's Finance and Audit Committee, and I volunteer for the finance department there. It's a remarkably large and complicated organization, and I feel like, every little bit that I can help in some way to help a family get into a home, which I think is so incredibly important for the stability of the family, is a good thing. And if everybody was able to do a little small thing to help other families in that way, it would all add up to a huge thing.
When was the last time you were on a swing?
No, I don't think I've been on a swing for decades. There was at one of my college reunions, I know several of us went over to this playground and sat around and talked while we sat on the swing. I don't think I swung, but we sat on the swings and just talked. But gosh, that must have been 25 years ago.
And our last question, what is your favorite movie?
Yeah, I'm a huge Star Trek fan. So I would say any of the Star Trek movies would be my favorite movies.
Any of them. Fantastic. Well, Mark Shaiken, thank you so much for stopping by.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. It's been great.
You have been listening to another edition of the Florida Writer Podcast with your host, Alison Nissen. Alison out. Woo! We're all done.
Oh, great. Thanks. That was easy.
How do you say your last name?
Shaken, not stirred.
Seriously, that's great. Mark Shaiken is the author of And Just Like That, Essays on a Life Before, During, and After the Law, as well as Fresh Start, a legal thriller, both available on Amazon and other online and brick-and-mortar stores. Watch for his next legal thriller, Unfair Discrimination, due out in spring of 2022. You can connect with Mark at markshaikenauthor.com. markshaikenauthor.com. For more information about the Florida Writers Association, visit us at floridawriters.org. You can also learn about our upcoming Florida Writers Con 2022 at floridawriters.org.